Scott Pilgrim, a franchise about an entire universe filled with horny people who fight each other to the death for the $2.15 they drop when they die. It was originally a comic made by Brian Lee O'Malley, released in 2004, and it got so popular so quickly it received a movie adaptation just 6 years later, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This movie is kind of a paradox to me. It's ahead of its time, it's incredibly dated. Its characters bounce off the walls, except when they don't. And I can't decide if its writing is brilliantly forward or extremely cluttered. But people loved it, and so did I. So when the animated version completely changed the entire plot, some people got upset. How dare you? The story was perfectly imperfect as it was. This is a spit in the face of fans, says user DocSpit0 with 272 karma on Reddit. Listen, I get it. The animated version made a huge plot change when they essentially made Ramona the main character of the show called Scott Pilgrim and treated the original storyline like a sticky note to give them vague inspiration. But I love this show. I think its animation style is gorgeous. The sound design is so fun and energetic. The editing is fast and crisp like a comic. Yeah, I'll admit, the voice acting isn't perfect and it has its flaws. But my thing is, why would you not want a new direction for the story? Like, you have the story, then you have the story, but condensed. Why would you want the same thing a third time? This is a bait and switch. They promised us a Scott Pilgrim adaptation, and what we got was nothing of the sort. Bro, can't you just watch the show? No! So why do I like the show's plot better? Well, let's start with the movie. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a Spy Kids, Shark Boy vs. Lava Girl level zany movie about Scott, a broke, awkward loser, who meets the girl of his dreams and has to beat up 7 attractive men to keep her. It has wacky action, it's energetic, there's some great performances, but there's a fatal flaw to it all. Scott x Ramona is incredibly rushed. Like, even more rushed than the comics, where they take about an evening to decide they love each other. Here's the scene where Scott asks her out, right? Scott orders a package, knowing that Ramona will be the delivery girl, and as she hands the package to him, he immediately asks her out, gets rejected, and won't sign the package until she says yes. Scott basically traps her, and it kind of sucks out the whimsy or romantic aura of the question for a quick gag.
You're the new kid on the block, right? I've lived here forever, so there are reasons for you to hang out with me.
You want me to hang out with you?
In the show, Scott signs the package, lets her go, and then asks her out, with Ramona looking visually pleased by the idea of being asked out. To me, this is a much more organic way for the conversation to flow. It helps me buy the fact that she gets to like Scott so quickly and, eventually makes out with him. And I understand the movie's dialogue is closer to the original comic, but guess what? Sometimes you gotta make changes, right? And this was a welcome one, in my opinion. The entire scene in the movie just plays Ramona's character so much more cold. Like, she doesn't even like him until, she does. She's like the human equivalent of an ice cube before and after they get in bed. Her actress was probably the weakest out of anyone in the movie, which is kind of unfortunate when the whole plot is, centered around her. The joke is supposed to be, they're so awkward together. But it doesn't really work when that connection is supposed to be the movie's emotional payoff.
Oh, wait. Can I get your number? Wow. Girl number.
Was a funny joke, though. I'll give you that. Listen, I understand nobody watches this movie for its compelling romance drama, but I mean, that's part of the reason I like the comics. So why not try to have that connection carry over? Next, we have Knives' character, who is kind of the odd one out to get the short end of the stick in the show. I respect the show's decision to focus more on Ramona and how she actually interacts with her exes as she fights or doesn't fight them. But inevitably, some characters do get less screen time when making writing changes. The movie does have this, however. Whoever played Knives gave 110%, and I appreciate it. This character on paper is flat as a brick. Her character has like 3 bullet points for personality traits. But goddamn, does this actress get her money's worth out of those 3 traits. But even so, I still don't understand the movie's approach to the story. When Scott, Ramona, and Knives are all meeting at the concert, Ramona sees Knives kiss Scott. So the tension is immediately gone. Like, why is she shocked later in the movie when she's like,
You cheated on me with Knives?
No, I cheated on Knives with you.
like, hello? Were you just not paying attention? Like, why is Ramona smiling when Scott's playing on stage? He just saw Knives kiss him after they went on a date. In the animated version, Ramona doesn't know about Knives. So when they're about to talk to each other about Scott, it builds tension in the scene. So even though the movie has significantly less time to work with, 1 hour 45 minutes versus a total of about 3 hours 45 for the show, they take much longer to get to the first fight, like a whole 10 minutes more when they have less time total. The action itself, however, is so incredibly cheesy, but in just the right ways. I just wish there was more of it. It's not even fair to compare the action scenes of the 2 versions, so I won't. But what I will do is compare it to the comic. See, when I was reading the comics to make this video, I realized that the action scenes were actually really brief originally. Still fun, still good, but it really was the character interactions and dialogue that made the comic so special. So I want to applaud both interpretations for absolutely taking that element of the series to the next level, and now they're a staple of Scott Pilgrim. Side note, I did not know this movie is where the
that's actually hilarious
voice clip came from, so the more you know. My favorite part about the animated version is that it follows the rules of show don't tell when introducing each character. See, sometimes it felt like the movie would break the idea for the sake of being faithful to the comic. But when translating to a more visual medium as opposed to one with text, I appreciate rewriting scenes to make it more action-based as opposed to description-based. What I mean is, we open episode 3 with Lucas Lee skateboarding. You don't need to tell me he used to skateboard. We open episode 2 with Envy Adams entering into the funeral in a grand song number. You don't need to tell me she's a big pop singer. Also, when we discover she used to date Scott, the shock of that information is more powerful because we've actually seen her perform. Like, really? He dated that girl? It's like the characters and the audience are on the same page. I like how the very first scene in the whole show is Ramona skating through Scott's head. It emphasizes how she has been on his mind for a long time. It's the first thing we see. How important she is to him. It doesn't feel as much like she just randomly appeared one day and now she's the most important person in his life. Even though that's exactly what happened. Basically, the show was very unafraid of messing with the order in which characters were introduced, which ironically made it more organic when each X had to be taken one by one. This creates the true strength of the animated version. Past all the bright colors and the video gamey sound effects and catchy music, which I all love by the way, the show really fleshes out the X characters by having Ramona interact with them and create conflict instead of Scott, because their stories center more around her than him. And in her stead, Scott's able to have his own subplot near the latter half of the show, where he realizes that his own foolishness has its own consequences, and that he must actively grow and change if he doesn't want to end up like.
Does that mean that we can get back together?
After 10 years? No, dude.
That makes sense. I
That. Also, side note, Scott jumping out this window is the funniest gag in either version.
Is Scott here?
You know what? He just left.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry.
The show definitely could have benefited from Scott embracing this kind of visual humor in his character. That's something that's sort of missing, although that in itself is a closer interpretation to the comic. However, the best part of the movie is that halfway through, they realize, hey, how about we just have a bunch of goofy fights? And they do. That Kata Yanagi twin battle, oh my goodness. They were cooking. 6-course, nutritious. Mwah. The movie knew its strengths and rightfully played to them. So, although I'm arguing for the sake of the show, the movie quickly realized the best way to use its limited runtime and did exactly that. So overall, the movie isn't horrible or anything, right? Or rather, it is horrible in all the correct areas. It's not perfect. There's a couple lines that are kind of
You did to him.
Listen, Kung Pao chicken.
dated, but it finds its own unique strengths and makes for a very enjoyable watch. I did, however, have a much better time watching Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. As fun and creative as the comic fights were, I wouldn't sleep on just how rich and structured its characters were. The show gave us a completely new perspective to experience those figures, and I had a blast the whole time. I rarely see creators be this open to studios changing their works, and I truly respect O'Malley for having the courage and humility to say, yeah, go ahead, do what you want. For a lot of these creators, their IP is like their baby, so it takes a lot of guts to be willing to change. I mean, hey, just look at the God of War creator. They basically had to rip the games out of his hands to get any sort of development in Kratos' story. But yeah, thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. Yeah. Bye.